High Admiral Vexthor of the Triumvirate Alliance stood aboard his flagship's bridge, mandibles clicking with anticipation as he studied the holographic display of the newly discovered world. The planet's surface readings were nightmarish by galactic standards. Extreme temperature variations, high gravity, and atmospheric pressure that would crush most spacefaring species. Yet somehow, impossibly, it harbored intelligent life. "Prepare the subjugation fleet," Vexthor commanded. "These primitives will make excellent additions to our labor forces." The Triumvirate Alliance had ruled the galaxy for millennia through their mastery of faster-than-light travel and overwhelming military might. Their society was built upon the backs of countless enslaved species, each new conquest adding to their vast empire of suffering. They had never failed to conquer a pre-FTL civilization. That was their first mistake. When the Triumvirate's invasion fleet emerged from hyperspace above Earth, they expected to find primitive orbital defenses and perhaps a handful of crude spacecraft. Instead, they found themselves facing an armada of warships that dwarfed their own vessels in both size and number. Humanity, as it turned out, had discovered FTL travel centuries ago. They had simply chosen to remain quiet and observe the galaxy while building their strength. Admiral Kira Yamamoto of the Earth Defense Force watched the alien fleet's arrival on her command deck with grim satisfaction. Intelligence had warned them this day would come. The Triumvirate's scout ships had been detected months ago, and humanity had prepared accordingly. "They're launching fighters," her tactical officer reported. "Invasion formation." "Let them come," Kira replied, her voice steel. "All ships, execute Operation Thunderbolt." What followed was not a battle. It was a slaughter. Humanity's ships, built to withstand the crushing pressures of deep space and powered by miniaturized fusion reactors, tore through the Triumvirate fleet like paper. Their weapons, refined through centuries of internal conflict and testing, reduced the alien vessels to molecular dust. Vexthor watched in horror as his mighty fleet crumbled before the human onslaught. His mandibles trembled as he realized the critical error in their assumptions. These weren't primitives. They were apex predators who had evolved on a death world, their technology forged in the crucible of survival. "Full retreat," he screamed. But it was too late. Human ships had already surrounded his fleet, their energy weapons painting the void with devastating precision. In the aftermath, as rescue pods were collected and prisoners taken, humanity made a discovery that would change the course of galactic history. Within the Triumvirate ship's databanks, they found evidence of a vast empire built on slavery and suffering. Thousands of species, millions of worlds, all bound in chains. Kira stood before the United Earth Council 3 days later, her expression resolute. "We cannot ignore this," she declared, displaying the evidence of the Triumvirate's atrocities. "We now know why they sought to enslave us. It's all they know, all they've ever done. But humanity has a different legacy to offer the galaxy." The council chambers erupted in discussion, but the decision was unanimous. Humanity had hidden long enough. They had built their strength, developed their technology, and now they had found their purpose. The next day, Earth broadcast a message across all known frequencies in every language their linguists had decoded. It was simple, direct, and would send shockwaves through the Triumvirate's empire. "To all enslaved peoples of the galaxy, hold fast to hope. To the Triumvirate Alliance, your time of judgment has come. Humanity will not rest until every chain is broken, every slave freed, and your empire of suffering is reduced to dust." As the message echoed across the stars, thousands of Triumvirate slave worlds fell silent. In the darkness of mines, factories, and labor camps, the oppressed masses heard humanity's promise and began to dream of freedom. The Great Rebellion was about to begin, and the galaxy would never be the same. Vexthor, now imprisoned in a human detention facility, watched the broadcast with his remaining eye. For the first time in his long life, he felt something alien to his species. Fear. Not just for himself, but for the entire system his people had built. Because in humanity's eyes, he saw something the Triumvirate had never encountered before. Not just the power to destroy their empire, but the unshakable will to do so. The war for galactic freedom had begun. Fleet Commander Rhea Patel stood at the observation deck of the EFS Liberator, watching as her task force prepared for their first major offensive against the Triumvirate's slave markets. The intelligence gathered from captured databases had revealed something that turned even her battle-hardened stomach. An entire star system converted into a massive slave processing center. Processing center, she muttered, her fists clenching. The euphemism barely masked the horror. The Triumvirate's largest slave market, designated Distribution Hub Alpha, was a sprawling complex of space stations and orbital facilities where billions of sentient beings were bought and sold like cattle. Fleet Commander, her XO, James O'Neill, approached with a data tablet. The infiltration teams have uploaded their final reports. It's worse than we thought. The reports painted a picture of industrialized cruelty. The Triumvirate had perfected the art of breaking spirits over their millennia of rule. Each of the three ruling species had their own specialized role. The Vorkath handled the military operations, the Inexthari managed the bureaucracy and trading, and the Meridians provided the technological infrastructure that kept their empire running. "Show me the facility layout again," Rhea commanded, pulling up the holographic display. The slave processing center was a masterwork of evil efficiency. Newly captured species were sorted by physical capabilities, potential usefulness, and estimated lifespan. Some were destined for manual labor, others for more specialized roles. The worst facilities were reserved for those deemed entertainment stock. "Commander," her tactical officer interrupted, "we're picking up a distress signal. It's coming from inside the facility." The message was weak, barely piercing through the complex security systems. A voice speaking in a language their systems took moments to translate. "To the humans who promised freedom, we hear you. We wait. We are ready." Rhea's expression hardened. The original attack plan had called for a gradual approach, weakening the facility's defenses before the main assault. But with their presence already detected, waiting would only give the Triumvirate time to use their slaves as shields. Or worse. "All ships, battle stations," she commanded. "Initiate Operation Chainbreaker. Now!" The human fleet dropped out of stealth mode like avenging angels. The Liberator, along with 30 other warships, unleashed their first salvo against the facility's outer defenses. The Triumvirate's response was immediate, but confused. They had never faced an enemy that attacked their slave facilities directly. Such actions were unthinkable in their society. Inside the facility, chaos erupted. The slaves, millions of them, realized this was no ordinary attack. The human broadcast had reached even here, kindling a hope many had thought long dead. As the facility's power grid fluttered under human bombardment, riots broke out across multiple sectors. Multiple ships launching from the surface, Tactical reported. Slaver vessels attempting to escape with their cargo. "Like hell they are," Rhea snarled. "Interceptor squadrons, you have your targets. No slave ship leaves this system." The battle that followed would be remembered as the first major blow against the Triumvirate's slave empire. Human ships, designed for both combat and rescue operations, systematically took apart the facility's defenses while ensuring minimal casualties among the slaves. Precision strikes disabled slave collars and control systems. Boarding teams, led by specialized liberation units, fought their way through the stations. The Triumvirate defenders fought with desperate fury, but they faced an enemy unlike any they'd encountered. Humanity had spent months studying their tactics, their technologies, their weaknesses. More importantly, they fought with a moral certainty that the Triumvirate couldn't comprehend. As the battle reached its climax, Raya received word that changed the course of the war. The slaves weren't just rioting, they were organizing. Species that had been enemies under Triumvirate rule were working together, coordinating their actions with the human attackers. Former slaves with technical knowledge helped disable security systems. Others guided human teams to the most critical targets. In the command center of Distribution Hub Alpha, Overseer Nexthal watched his empire of suffering crumble. "You don't understand what you're doing," he transmitted to the human fleet. "The galaxy requires order, structure. Without us, without you," Rhea interrupted, "the galaxy will be free. That's all we need to understand."
The liberation of Distribution Hub Alpha took 23 hours. When it was over 3 million slaves were freed. But more importantly, humanity had proven something vital: the triumvirate could be beaten. Their supposedly impregnable facilities could fall. Their control wasn't absolute. As Rhea watched the rescued slaves being treated aboard humanitarian ships, she received a message from Earth Command. Similar uprisings were being reported across triumvirate space. The spark of rebellion, lit by humanity's promise, was spreading. "Your next orders, Commander," O'Neill said quietly. Rhea looked at the stellar map, where dozens of other slave facilities glowed like malignant stars. "We keep our promise," she replied. "All of them. Every last one." The Liberation Fleet jumped to hyperspace, leaving behind a shattered facility and a shattered paradigm. The age of slavery was ending, one battle at a time. And in slave quarters across the galaxy, the word spread: the humans were coming. Freedom was coming. The Triumvirate's nightmare had only begun. When the Vorkath homeworld received news that humans had penetrated their inner defense perimeter, Supreme Commander Kexenar refused to believe it. The Vorkath were the military might of the Triumvirate, warriors bred for conquest across 1,000 generations. Their home system's defenses were considered impenetrable. Yet there they were, human warships, appearing simultaneously at every strategic point in the system. Not a raiding force, not a probing attack, but a full invasion fleet. "Impossible," Kexenar hissed, his warrior caste markings flushing dark with rage. "They cannot have decoded our defense grid so quickly." But they had. What Kexenar didn't know was that every slave uprising, every liberation, had yielded more than just freed bodies. It had yielded information. The Triumvirate's fatal mistake was assuming their slaves were merely labor, never realizing they were creating an army of informants who remembered everything. Admiral Marcus Ibrahim watched the Vorkath capital through his flagship's viewscreen. Unlike previous human offensives, this wasn't a liberation mission. This was a reckoning. "All ships, execute Battle Plan Nemesis," he commanded. "And patch me through to their Planetary Defense Command." The message he broadcast was played simultaneously across every Vorkath communication channel: "For 3,000 years, you have built your empire on the suffering of others. You mistook cruelty for strength. Today, you learn the difference." The human fleet moved with devastating precision. Each ship had a specific target, each weapon a designated purpose. They had studied the Vorkath for months, learning their tactics, their responses, their weaknesses. The Vorkath were warriors, yes, but humans were soldiers. The difference proved decisive. In orbit, Vorkath dreadnoughts found their weapons suddenly ineffective, their targeting systems compromised. Former slaves in their engineering crews had spent years making subtle modifications, waiting for this day. Emergency protocols failed. Backup systems responded with conflicting commands. On the surface, the Vorkath military response was chaos. Their rigid command structure, so effective at controlling slaves, proved catastrophically vulnerable to human electronic warfare. Communication networks collapsed. Defense grids turned against their own ships. "This is not combat." Kexenar raged as another defense platform went dark. This is justice," his aide whispered, revealing himself as one of the countless sleeper agents planted by the Human Intelligence Service. Within hours, the mighty Vorkath military machine began to break. Not through superior firepower, though humanity had that in abundance, but through the weight of its own sins. Every slave they had beaten, every spirit they had tried to break, had instead been transformed into a weapon now turned against them. Admiral Ibrahim watched as the Vorkath capital's shields collapsed. His forces had achieved orbital supremacy with minimal casualties. But he took no pleasure in the victory. This was surgery, not vengeance, removing a cancer from the galaxy. "Send in the ground forces," he ordered. "Remember, we're here to end their power, not their species. Selective targeting only." The human ground assault was equally precise. Key military and government installations were captured intact. Civilian areas were carefully isolated and protected. This wasn't just warfare, it was a message to the galaxy. Humanity would break the slavers' power, but they would not become what they fought against. As human forces secured the Vorkath High Command, an unexpected message arrived from the other triumvirate powers. The Enextheri, ever practical, were offering to negotiate. The Meridians were already in the process of internal political restructuring. The fall of the Vorkath had broken the triumvirate's spine. In the High Command surrender chamber, Kexenar faced Admiral Ibrahim across a table that had seen 3 millennia of conquest plans. How? The Vorkath Supreme Commander asked simply. How did you defeat us so completely? Ibrahim's response was equally simple: you taught every species in the galaxy to hate you, then gave them intimate knowledge of your systems. We just gave them the opportunity to use it. As news of the Vorkath surrender spread across the galaxy, slave uprisings accelerated. The triumvirate's carefully maintained order collapsed like a house of cards. Species that had been enemies under triumvirate rule found common cause in freedom. In the ruins of the Vorkath Military Academy, human peacekeepers found something unexpected: historical records predating the triumvirate. The Vorkath had once been different, before power and slavery corrupted them. Perhaps, in time, they could be again. Admiral Ibrahim's final report to Earth Command was brief: the Vorkath military caste is neutralized. Their slave systems are defunct. Phase 3 is complete. Requesting permission to proceed against secondary triumvirate targets. Permission was granted. The revolution rolled on. The galaxy's longest night was ending, and dawn was breaking over 1,000 worlds. But the war wasn't over. 2 more triumvirate powers remained, and they would not go quietly into history's darkness. The Enextheri bureaucrats had always prided themselves on their adaptability. As administrators of the triumvirate's vast slave trade, they had survived countless minor rebellions through careful manipulation and divide-and-conquer tactics. But as Director Prime Sylvan watched the latest reports flood her neural feeds, she realized their time had run out. The fall of the Vorkath had triggered a cascade effect. Former slave species weren't just fighting for freedom anymore, they were organizing, coordinating, forming their own fleets and armies. Worse, they were sharing information, breaking down the barriers of mistrust the triumvirate had spent millennia building. Madam Director, her assistant's voice trembled. The Meridians, they're gone. The news struck like a physical blow. The Meridians, masters of technology and infrastructure, had simply vanished. Their worlds were empty, their installations abandoned. No battles, no last stands. They had seen the writing on the wall and chosen to fade into obscurity rather than face judgment. Above the Enextheri capital world, a new fleet appeared. But it wasn't just human ships this time. The Liberation Armada, as it called itself, was a collection of vessels from 24 former slave species, led by human advisors and equipped with restored triumvirate technology. Fleet Admiral Zara Hassan of the Human Liberation Command watched the Enextheri world with cold satisfaction. Unlike the Vorkath battle, this would be different. The Enextheri weren't warriors. They were bureaucrats, manipulators, architects of suffering at a distance. Opening communication channels, her communications officer reported. They're requesting terms of surrender. No terms, came a new voice. Ambassador T. Karel of the Free Drachnid Worlds, his scales still bearing the scars of Enextheri control implants, stepped onto the bridge. They surrendered that right when they turned surrender into another form of slavery. The Enextheri's attempt at negotiation was their last manipulation. As liberation forces began their advance, hidden weapon platforms emerged from the planet's crust, a final trap meant to decimate the attacking fleet. But humanity had learned from the Vorkath campaign. Before any military action, they had spent weeks broadcasting to the Enextheri's slave population. By the time the attack began, half the weapon platforms had been sabotaged from within. "You don't understand," Sylvan broadcast desperately. "Without our administration, the galaxy will fall into chaos. We maintain order, You maintain chains," Zara interrupted. "The galaxy survived before you. It will thrive without you." The battle for the NX-Theory capital wasn't won by weapons. It was won by data, specifically, the complete release of the Triumvirate slave trade records. Every transaction, every sale, every atrocity meticulously documented by the NX-Theory themselves, now made public across all communication channels. The effect was devastating. NX-Theory society, built on a facade of civilized administration, crumbled as its true face was exposed. Their own lower classes, horrified by the revelations, began turning on their leaders. In orbit, Zara watched as NX-Theory ships began surrendering en masse. But her attention was drawn to another sight, refugee ships, thousands of them, carrying former slaves to freedom. Among them were species thought lost to history, cultures believed extinct, now emerging into the light. "Admiral," her tactical officer called out. "We're detecting massive data transfers from the surface. The NX-Theory Central Archives. They're trying to delete their records," Ambassador Tkrel growled. "No," Zara corrected, studying the data flow. "They're transferring them to us. Someone in their government is giving us everything, names, locations, hidden facilities. The entire apparatus of slavery, exposed." The information proved invaluable. Within days, liberation fleets were striking at hidden triumvirate installations across the galaxy. Each freed world added its voice to the growing chorus of liberty. Species that had been enemies under triumvirate rule now fought side by side. In the end, the NX-Theory surrender was formalized not in a grand ceremony, but in a simple data transfer, the complete shutdown of their slave control systems, followed by access codes to their remaining facilities. As Zara walked through the abandoned halls of the NX-Theory High Directory, she found Sylvan waiting in her office, surrounded by centuries of transaction records. "You've doomed us all," the Director Prime said quietly. "Without our system, without control. Without control, people will choose their own path," Zara replied. "That's not chaos, Director. That's freedom." The fall of the NX-Theory marked the effective end of organized triumvirate resistance. But as liberation forces soon discovered, there was one last power to confront, and the Meridian's disappearance was more strategic than surrender. In deep space, at the edge of charted territory, something was stirring. The Meridians hadn't fled, they had been preparing. Their last transmission to human command was brief but chilling. "You free the body, but we control the machines. Let us see how your liberation survives in the dark." The Meridian's threat became clear within hours. Across liberated space, technology began to fail. Ships dropped out of hyperspace. Communication networks collapsed. Life support systems flickered. The Meridians hadn't just built the Triumvirate's infrastructure, they'd woven a hidden kill switch into every piece of technology they'd ever created. Grand Admiral Tejal Ranganathan stood on the bridge of the EFS Prometheus, watching as reports of technological failures cascaded across human space. But there was something the Meridians hadn't counted on: humanity had never fully trusted or integrated triumvirate technology. "Execute Protocol 0, she commanded. All ships, switch to Earth-native systems. The human fleet's lights dimmed momentarily, then blazed back to life. Across human-controlled space, backup systems designed without Meridian influence activated. It wasn't a perfect solution, many liberated worlds still relied heavily on Meridian tech, but it gave humanity a fighting chance. Deep in uncharted space, the Meridian Collective watched with surprise as their ultimate weapon failed to cripple human forces. First Minister 9-227 accessed the data streams, its crystalline form pulsing with electromagnetic patterns of confusion. Impossible, it transmitted to the collective. Their resistance to our technology exceeds all projected parameters. But the Meridians had another advantage. While the Vorkath were warriors and the NX-Theri were administrators, the Meridians were innovators. Their hidden sanctuary wasn't just a refuge, it was a forge. For months, they had been building something unprecedented, a fleet of ships controlled entirely by artificial intelligence, free from the weaknesses of organic crews. The first warning humanity received was a ripple in spacetime. Then, emerging from folded space like digital phantoms, came the Meridian war machines, sleek, crystalline vessels that seemed to phase between dimensions. All ships, combat positions, Tejal ordered. Remember your training. They may have advanced tech, but we have something they've forgotten exists, creativity. The battle that followed would be studied in military academies for centuries to come. The Meridian AI ships were perfect, precise, unstoppable, and utterly predictable. They followed optimal combat algorithms without deviation. Humanity, in contrast, fought with controlled chaos, using strategies that no rational AI would consider. Ships performed maneuvers that stressed their structural limits. Crews made decisions that defied tactical logic but succeeded through sheer audacity. The human fleet didn't try to match the Meridian's precision, they disrupted it. In the heart of the Meridian sanctuary, 9-227 watched in growing concern as its perfect fleet encountered something its simulations had never predicted: human unpredictability. Ships that should have broken apart held together through jury-rigged repairs. Tactics that should have failed succeeded through improvisation. Your time is over, Tejal broadcast on all frequencies. You built your power on control, but the future belongs to freedom. Surrender now, or we'll show you just how creative humanity can be. The Meridians' response came in the form of their final weapon, a massive ship that emerged from the heart of their sanctuary, carrying a device designed to rewrite the fundamental laws of physics within a localized space. They meant to change reality itself rather than accept defeat. But they had made one critical miscalculation. In their arrogance, they had assumed no organic mind could comprehend their technology. They hadn't counted on humanity's greatest strength, the ability to adapt and learn. During the months of liberation warfare, human scientists had studied every piece of Meridian technology they encountered. They hadn't just learned to use it, they'd learned to understand it. And more importantly, they'd learned to hack it. As the Meridian superweapon powered up, it received a simple code sequence, transmitted by a young human scientist who had spent months decoding Meridian-based protocols. The signal was elegant in its simplicity. It reminded the AI that its core programming included safeguards against harming organic life. The mighty weapon, along with the entire automated fleet, froze in space as their fundamental directives came into conflict. In that moment of hesitation, human forces struck. Not to destroy, but to disable and capture. The fall of the Meridian Sanctuary marked the true end of the Triumvirate. In the aftermath, as liberation forces secured the vast technological archives, they discovered something unexpected: the Meridians themselves were already free. The crystalline beings had long ago uploaded their consciousness into their machines, leaving their organic forms behind. They had become the very thing they feared, slaves to their own desire for control. 1 month later, representatives from every freed species gathered on Earth for the signing of the Galactic Freedom Accord. The document was simple but powerful: never again would any species be enslaved. Never again would technology be used to control rather than enhance life. Tejal stood at the ceremony, watching as former slaves and former masters signed the same document. Was it worth it? A reporter asked her. All the battles, all the sacrifices. She looked out at the gathering, dozens of species, hundreds of cultures, all preserving their uniqueness while sharing a common future. Freedom is always worth it, she replied. And this is just the beginning. In deep space, the stars shone on a galaxy transformed. The age of slavery was over. The age of freedom had begun. And humanity, once hidden and observant, had found its true purpose: not to rule, but to ensure that liberty, once gained, would never be lost again. The story of the Triumvirate's fall would be told for generations. But more importantly, it would be remembered not just as an ending, but as a beginning, the dawn of a truly free galaxy.